Welcome to our Biz Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Cuthbert, Creative Director at Baker Creative. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it.
I am all about resilience, and resilience officially defined is about bouncing back from adversity. But I don't want to bounce back. I don't want to be back where we were before the pandemic, for example. I want to bounce forward.
Welcome, Jean. Thanks so much for doing the podcast with us. Introduce to everyone a little bit about your background.
I am the queen slash founder slash president of Happy People Win and Resilient People Thrive. I live on the Central Coast of California, and I have the best job in the world. I get to travel all over to cool places and meet fun people like you, and I love what I do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think people are going to learn a lot about you and how you can help them and your philosophy, and I think they'll get a lot out of it.
Good, I do too.
So, how did your childhood, in Africa and Asia really shape your outlook on life?
Hugely, hugely. And it's funny because, of course, when you're in the midst of it, you're just going, oh my God, I can't believe we don't have McDonald's. We're lamenting. We don't even have Wonder Bread. My mom made our bread. That's how horrible my childhood was. But it's funny, when I was 7 and I had a 4, 3, and 1-year-old sister, white blonde hair, little girls living in LA in the early 60s, my dad moves us all over to Ethiopia. And so it was a huge deal. First of all, I think it would be a big deal now to have someone move their children to Africa. And it was the best childhood. And they say that when you leave Africa, part of your heart stays. And I absolutely believe that. So as a very young child, I saw people with nothing. I mean, literally, who would give you the only shirt they have off their back. They were such lovely people, full of joy. And so I was raised in an environment where I felt very safe and very loved. And even though we stuck out like a sore thumb, because, in the early 60s, I mean, many of the people we met out in the wild had never seen white people before, especially white-haired little girls. And so I learned about gratitude very young, and I learned to appreciate. And I continue to travel to Africa. After Africa, we lived in Asia for 5 years. My brother was born when we were in Ethiopia, and then my parents ended up their career overseas. My brother graduated from a high school a half a mile by 3 Mile Island. Came back to live with me in Santa Barbara, California. There was no cars over there. He got 6 speeding tickets in a month, and I shipped him back. He was not ready to live in the United States. And I think that one of the major resilience, traits is gratitude, and that is how I live my life. I really recognize how incredibly lucky we are in the United States. It's not perfect by any means, but we have hope here, and we have a lot to be grateful for.
Absolutely. And I think, if you've traveled a lot of places, you do get a little slice of that and really be able to appreciate when you come back to the States, in a very profound way, how different it is here.
I know. And, it's interesting. Two of my sisters got hepatitis as kids because they drank from the hose. We were playing outside and you're thirsty and you drink from the hose. Well, you had to boil the water first. And so they both got sick. And then all these years later, I was in Uganda right before the shutdown here, and we still had to boil water. I mean, there's not a lot that's changed in Africa. And we still, we have paved roads here. We have toilets, not holes in the ground. We have electricity. We have Wi-Fi. And we have a meltdown if our electricity goes out for an hour. And I have dear friends in Africa who don't have any electricity in their home. And so it's just a matter of perspective. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have what we have here. I'm just saying we should be grateful for it.
Absolutely. And believe it or not, there are pockets in America that have no electric.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. And
yeah,
I think that's a really good point. My sister brought her kids down to South America to work on a project. They were building an orphanage. And I said, Mary, that's kind of a rich kid thing to do because you could go to certain towns in California and help because they are desperate in need. And you're right. Absolutely. And so for me, it's I try not to shame people who complain about, my $100,000 BMW had a scratch, but just to say, you know what, in the scheme of things, I want to share a real quick story, and you can totally delete this if you want. But when I was in Uganda, I adopted a school, and there's a thing called white savior, which is ugly, which is people, Europeans and Americans who tend to go to third world countries, what we call third world countries, and give candy and take pictures and leave. I adopt for life. These are my friends for life. So I went to a school that I have adopted. It is in my will. And I said, what is the first thing you need? And he said, toilets for the boys. And I said, how much would it cost? And he said, 22. And I said, I'm going to go back home. I'm going to go fund me, raise 22,000. And he goes, for what? And I go, the toilets. He goes, 2,200 US. So I sent him a check for 2,500 extra just in case. And don't be jealous. They're called jeans latrines. And there's a sign that says jeans latrines. Is that the best? And I thought, again, they need toilets. It isn't like they need, something, brand new laptop. They need the basics. And so again, it reminds me on a daily basis how fortunate I am.
I agree. One time I went to out west and I went onto the Indian reservation and I was going to buy some art directly from the artists because I wanted them to be able to get all the money direct. And so I went to the Pablos and I went into this old village and I knocked on the door because I was told that some artisans lived there, and I opened the door and it was this older woman sweeping dirt with a recliner ripped up with duct tape. And it was just like on a little table was a TV, and it was just I was just amazing. No water, no electric. And that was so wrong.
I know. It's interesting. When we first moved over there, there were some kids playing soccer in front of our house. And so this is the early 60s. And my dad went out to talk to them and he said, what is your soccer ball? And it was a dried cow bladder that was blown up. That was their soccer ball. So my dad contacted friends in the United States and they started this athletic league and they sent over soccer balls and things. So one of my friends' kids just moved to Tanzania last year. And in front of his house, there were kids playing with a soccer ball that was socks that they sewed together to be a soccer ball. And I thought, again, 40 years later, 50 years later, 60, 50, not a lot has changed. And so it's a tough one, especially I think, in around the holidays and the new year, it's all about money in the United States. It really is. It's about buying presents and New Year's resolution and joining the gym, money stuff. And I like to celebrate by giving back. I told you we're doing a thing for seniors for the holidays. And that's what fills my heart, not the tangible items. Even though when you look behind me, I have a lot of stuff, but I am a book addict and I read actual books that you can hold. Do you remember those?
Yes, yes.
I don't have a Kindle. I'm going to Africa on Monday and I'm bringing books. That's going to be like, I'm bringing no clothes, just books.
Aw. So growing up, what did your dad do to go all these places all over the world?
How many people are listening to this? He was actually CIA.
Oh,
Can I even say that? I don't know if I should. I say it all the time. It was a big secret. We just found out 2 years ago. Isn't
what,
that crazy?
so what did you think he did?
State Department. Even though when we came back to the States and we lived in Washington, D.C. for a while, he never set foot in the State Department.
Wow.
Yeah, he was recruited. He had a master's degree and he was working, he was a herpetologist, a master's degree in herpetology. And then he decides most obvious job, cop. So he becomes an LA County sheriff and he was recruited. And, you know, master's degree back then, even now for a police officer. And he was very smart and he spoke a number of languages. And he was a good guy.
Aw. It
Yeah.
sounds like he was a kind person.
He was so amazing. I mean, we used to, when we moved back to the United States, we would come home and there'd be people we didn't know at our house. And he would meet people and invite them to stay with us. He just had the biggest heart. He was, imagine this, when he was a police officer in the 60s, he thought only in the late 50s and early 60s before we moved, he thought only women should be police officers because he said always his partners, something would happen and they would think physical response. And he said the female partners, very few and far between, would think emotional response, you know, talking to people. So it was very interesting. He was a dichotomy. He was a very interesting man.
And I can see why you learned a lot from him.
Oh my goodness, so much. And it's funny too, because he didn't think things through oftentimes when we would go on adventures. And so when we first got to Africa, we had a Land Rover. And so here's four little girls in the car. My dad just takes off. And once you leave Addis Ababa back then, there was nothing. I mean, there wasn't roads. We would just go through the dirt and we had a flat tire, changed it, no problem. And then we had a second flat tire in the middle of nowhere. So my dad takes the tire and just starts walking. And we are alone with my mom in the middle of nowhere. And there's trees, occasional trees. It's very dry. And we sang Girl Scout songs for about 4 hours till my dad got back. When he got back, there was a circle of Ethiopians around our truck, just staring like we were animals in a zoo, which we kind of were. And I said to my mom, "You were so strong." She goes, "Oh, I wanted to kill your father, but I couldn't let you guys know it." And we would just, it's like, Dad, you should have thought that through before you did that. But he was all about adventure. And so am I. I'll do crazy things like that. I won't like bungee jump ever or ride a scary roller coaster, but I would totally take off in the middle of Africa, which I'm doing next week.
Well, I mean, why do you think it's so hard for people to achieve balance and, harmony in their life?
Wow. I think there's a lot of societal pressure on us that we should be doing certain things at a certain time in our lives. I think that there's a huge amount of pressure on material items, which is kind of what I talked about earlier, that you need to have the biggest and the best. And oh my God, your car's 3 years old. And I mean, I just got a new phone and the phone guy, because my phone was literally having problems. And he goes, "Your phone's so old." I go, "It's 3 years old." And he goes, "That's really old." And we're just in this society that puts a lot of pressure. And I think how I grew up, my parents, and my own personality, I don't feel that pressure at all. I was at an event and I had these gorgeous earrings on. And people said, "Oh my God, those are stunning. Where'd you get them?" I go, $7.99 TJ Maxx. And my friend goes, "Don't say stuff like that." I go, "Why? These are, I was proud. They were gorgeous. And what am I supposed to say? $18,000, you know? And so I don't feel that pressure. And I take my vacation time very seriously. When I didn't work for myself and I would apply for jobs, I would not negotiate pay. I would negotiate time off. I am all about adventures and having fun and visiting friends. Life is too short. And so I think for me, balance comes pretty naturally. I don't also subscribe to the 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. I will work when, you know, when I feel like it. And of course you can't do that if you work in a store, but we have an interesting society with that pressure, I think. And it isn't common throughout the world.
I also think social media makes it amplify.
Yeah, I have an interesting friend you should interview. She just got her PhD in psychology of social media. And basically, it can be scary as hell. And the effect on people's mental health. And, I want to mention with that, I had gotten an email from a friend who said, "Hey, can we talk?" And I said, "Yeah." And she called me and she said, "I haven't gotten out of bed in a month. I'm horribly depressed. I haven't been eating." And I go, "Wait, wait, wait. Your Facebook posts are like shiny, happy unicorns sparkling in the sky." And she goes, "Oh, everybody lies on social media." And I thought, that's pretty dangerous. I mean, she was close to suicidal and she's posting these things. And I said, "I don't expect you to post, my mental health is horribly deteriorating, but shouldn't it be just your friends on social media?" And I realized that's not true. I mean, people will friend anybody. And social media, we have to be careful about.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. It's just the persona of people that aren't always represent how they really are, what their lives are really about. They see this narrative.
That could be true, could not be true. Yeah, I agree.
I think there's a version of people's lives that are on social media that may not always indicate everything that's going on with someone.
For sure. And I don't think we have to share everything single thing on social media either. I'm glad we've gotten out of the phase of taking pictures of everything we eat. That was a thing. And it's like, what? And so yeah, I'm just glad we didn't have it when I was a kid.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
so glad. I'm glad we didn't have cameras either. I mean, we had cameras, but not like,
Yeah, right.
I mean, I said to someone recently, I said, I asked someone to take a picture of a friend of mine and I said, "I have unlimited film. You can take a bunch of pictures." And she didn't get it. But I remember before, you had 24 pictures, so you didn't want to waste anything. And now you can just go crazy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's
So that's
absolutely
fun.
true.
Yeah,
But then you always wonder, does someone want to see every moment of your life being documented? That's my question.
I know. No. So next week before I go to Africa, I'm doing a gig in Arizona, and I'm going to see a friend of mine who started playing on TikTok. He has 6.1 million followers. Verified 6.1 million. And his videos, I love him dearly, are so stupid. I don't even get it. So I guess there are people who want to see every minutia of your life.
So what could someone do to try to achieve harmony in their life? Maybe they're not happy. Maybe it's kind of like that,
Yeah.
disconnect for them. Because, work's not always happy for everyone. Home's not
Oh,
always.
for sure. Well, I am all about resilience, and resilience officially defined is about bouncing back from adversity. But I don't want to bounce back. I don't want to be back where we were before the pandemic, for example. I want to bounce forward. So there's a number of things, and one of them is gratitude and living a life of gratitude. And there's a lot of jobs that you feel like, what am I doing? I'm not helping anybody. I'm not making a difference. And so in that case, you need to find a way to make a difference outside work. So giving back in some way. And it's pretty easy to do because most nonprofits, their requirement for you to volunteer is that you're breathing. I mean, they desperately need help. Even little things like being kind to someone. I tend to, if I'm in line, I will buy, if the person behind me just has one or two things, I'll buy it for them. And I just did it the other day. This guy, he was an employee and he was buying a drink for his break. And I said, I'll get it. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, I'll buy it for you. I said, scan it, then you can go on your break. You don't have to wait for me. And he goes, you're buying my drink? I go, what is it, $80? It was like $2. And he was so excited. And how simple is that? So you don't have to be Oprah and buy everybody a car. You can buy, do a simple thing. Another thing is practicing being in the moment. We tend to, I think Americans aren't good at this. We tend to focus on the future or worry about the past, and there's nothing we can do about either of them at this point. So practicing mindfulness, being in the moment, I diaphragmatically breathe. And I have to tell you, when I wake up at 3 in the morning and everything is crazy at 3 in the morning, just taking deep cleansing breaths and focusing on my breath will get me back to sleep. And when you're stressed out or when things aren't going well, just taking the easiest is the box breathing, which is just breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, letting go, and repeating. I tend to do it longer now. I do about 7 or 8. But a friend of mine is a police officer, and he was really not doing well. And his chief sent him to a rehab facility to get clean and sober, and then to a mindfulness training. And he said now when he gets a call that everybody's agitated, and so is he. He gets back in his car, he might get another immediate call. He says he spends 3 minutes diaphragmatically breathing, practicing mindfulness, and he goes from fight or flight to calm. Just that quick. And I think we need to incorporate that into our day because people have stressful jobs. And even if your job isn't stressful, there's so much going on in the world right now that we need to really step back and take a moment for ourselves and center ourselves.
Yeah.
Another thing is optimism, and sometimes it is hard, but I can always find the happy. I mean, even YouTube 3-minute video of a dog can absolutely put me in a happy mood. It's the little things.
So, in today's environment, the marketplace is kind of volatile. And, people getting laid off, actually, people getting sick, some people that maybe even in a hospice situation.
Yeah.
It can be very depressing and, very disappointing. But how could someone in those situations be able to revisit these concepts?
I'm actually a huge fan of whatever works. And pharmaceuticals absolutely are necessary for some people to get out of that deep funk. Never, ever be ashamed to reach out for help. And it might mean that, it might be talking to a therapist. There's so many groups available. And I'm also a huge advocate of group support. A friend of mine lost her dog, and it was her child. And she found out that our hospice group actually has a support group for people who've lost their pets. How wonderful is that to be in a room where people get it? And I'll tell you an interesting thing. I'm so fortunate that I am friends with Frank DeAngelis. And Frank was the principal at Columbine during the massacre. And I admire him so much. Every time we Zoom, I cry because he says something that just touches my heart. And last time I talked to him a few months ago, I said, where have you been? And he said, I was at Uvalde. And I said, Frank, because he says, I understand. And so he every time there's a school shooting, I mean, it brings this back. So he told me this thing. He said that months after the massacre happened, he went to his doctor, and his doctor said, Frank, who are you talking to about this? And he said, my wife. And he said, oh, if you were shot, would you have had your wife do the surgery? And he goes, of course not. And he said, your wife's not a therapist. And I think that's really important. And Frank has been seeing the same therapist on and off for what, 23 years now. And I think we need to destigmatize that and see it as a sign of strength. And another thing is, most often it isn't bosses who notice something's going on with an employee, it's a peer. And so approaching them and saying, you know, I care about you. Is everything okay? And not pushing it, but just letting people know that you are available. Utilize your EAP program. I think that, I mean, if I had an EAP program, I would be using it every single time I could. We all need someone to talk to. And talking to a professional, I think, is important. Reaching out. I want to add something else that I read that I love so much. This woman wrote that when her friends call her and say, you know, they assume that she has time to talk to them. And so even though you're overwhelmed, you go, okay, yeah, I'll talk to you. Tell me your problems. And so what she started to do is if she called someone, she says, do you have the bandwidth right now to handle this? And a true friend can say, no, not now. Let's talk tomorrow. I love that idea of asking permission before you just load on a friend. That's why we have professionals. But I think that respecting others' bandwidth is really an important thing.
Oh, absolutely. And it also goes along with boundaries as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to set boundaries because otherwise there are people out there who will use and abuse us.
Absolutely. So I know that there's a difference between bouncing back and bouncing forward. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Well, I think bouncing back is to where you were before the situation happened. And if you were at the perfect place, great. But many of us weren't. And I don't think we were as a country. I don't think we were as a world. And I think this is the first time that a pandemic, this has affected every single inch of the earth. And so I like to look at it as instead of going back to where we were, to go forward and forge a new path, to make better decisions, to be more empathetic. Where I live, we started, and I'm very proud of this, even though I had no part in deciding, coming up with these ideas, but I donate. We have all these little food, what do they call them? These little food areas that you can go to and not feel embarrassed and get, you know, different things that you need. Food pantries, just little ones in neighborhoods. And why don't we do that all the time? Why don't we have Toys for Tots more than just at Christmas? You know, why don't we expand our empathy? Because I saw a lot of empathy during the pandemic. And let's move forward with that and become better people. I know I'm a Pollyanna. I know I trust immediately and I like people immediately. And I've been burned, but I'm still not going to change. I have hope for the future. Otherwise, why are we here? If you think, oh, the future is going to be so bad. My sister has interns from our college here, Cal Poly, and one of them said to her, how did you handle the last pandemic? And she goes, oh my God, I wasn't alive. You know, we didn't have a playbook. And I said to her, Mary, she's just telling you you're looking old these days. You know, I want to build up her self-esteem. But there's no playbook. So let's make our own and let's be more positive. And it's amazing. I want to add another thing. And again, you can edit me out. When I was teaching, I taught 10 years at different colleges, and it's my favorite thing, but I travel too much to do it now. And so one of the things I decided to do, it was a wellness class, is I had 300 points out of 1,000, a make a difference project. And they go, what do we have to do? I go, I don't know. It better be good though. It's 300 points. And put them into teams. And when they did the presentations in front of the class of what they did, I cried the entire time. It was beautiful. And one of the teams went up and did free hugs at our farmers market. And I was concerned because one of the guys on the team had a very, very rough childhood. And I didn't know his motivation. I just didn't fully understand. So I went up to spy on them. They gave over 1,000 hugs. And I said to him, what do you think? He goes, you know what's really weird? When you're nice to other people, you feel better about yourself. He goes, don't cry. I went, okay, okay. But he got it, that I know I felt way better buying the guy his drink in line than he did. It's just a little thing. And we need to do that more. And so maybe the very least, someone listening to this podcast will go, you know what? I'm going to start doing that. Little things, even compliments, right?
So Jean, so then even at work, how can a company incorporate, some of this to help their staff be more resilient and,
Mm.
be more empathetic with themselves and the customers they serve?
I think that there's a lot of things. So one of the things that companies can do is, when I was working at a hospital and there was so much stress, and I got a yoga instructor to come to the hospital, and the hospital paid it first, and then they said the employees can pay, and it was only $3 for an hour yoga session. And it's so lovely to be able to take a break and relax. So a business can definitely do that. I'm also a huge advocate of chair massage at work. And the companies don't even have to pay. I mean, the employees are allowed to have a break. And just to go in and have your shoulders rubbed for 10 minutes is heaven. So the companies can think about ways to ease their employees' stress. Another company I work with, it's a spa. And so they have a lovely kitchen for their members. Well, what they decide to do once a week is to offer food for the employees. You bring your Tupperware in, they'll make like Chinese chicken salad. You tell them in advance, you pay $3 for this delicious meal. It's lovely to have someone come who does oil changes, to come to the workplace and do them in the parking lot, environmentally correct, not just dumping them. You have to make sure they're legit. But how lovely is that, instead of going and sitting at Jiffy Lube for 45 minutes on the way home? So there's businesses can really think of ways to ease the stress of their employees, having flu shots in the workplace, those kind of things. That is hugely helpful. Another thing is to have the employees involved in somehow giving back. So one of the companies I work with, they have a big container in their lobby. And one month they collect peanut butter for the food banks, another month tuna, things that the food bank can really use. And a side note, I had, before COVID, a Christmas party every year, and I have it in January because December is too busy. And I would write, if you were planning on bringing a hostess gift, please don't. Instead, bring, and I would contact a nonprofit and I said, what do you need? And people much prefer giving a bag of dog food instead of $10. And so that's a thing that the workplace can be involved with, and it makes a difference. Where we live, we have beach cleanup, and it also is really good for your branding, having 30 people at the beach with your logo on t-shirts, cleaning up the beach. So many things that they can do. Another company I work with has what's called a CROW team, which is work spelled backwards. And they're volunteers, and they get to have an hour extra for lunch each month, and they get together and they decide fun things that the staff can do. And it's everything from dress up days, all different kinds of things, to have fun at work, which I think is a brilliant idea. And what research shows is it doesn't diminish work time. It actually, it makes people more productive when they have fun at work. So there's so many different things, and it doesn't cost a fortune. One of the companies I work with, they said, we bring our staff and their families to Mexico for a week every year at a resort. And I said, okay, you don't need to really do that. I mean, that is super expensive. You can have, pizza night. A doctor's office I work with, they have around this time of year, they get these miniature pumpkins, and after work one night, they have all this food, and people decorate their miniature pumpkins, and they put them on shelves in the waiting room, and everybody gets to see what they decorated, and the patients get to vote for their favorite one, and just fun things like that. I suggest going to a local college near you and see if they have a program for engagement specialists. And this is kind of a new thing. My friend has a full-time job doing this, and her main job is making sure the employees stay engaged, that they have fun at work, that they feel that they're making a difference, that they get to know each other. When I was working at a company in Sacramento, I went to the local comedy store and I said, how much is it? And they said, at the time it was $15 2-drink minimum. I said, what if I buy out the place? They said, well, you could do it on a Thursday night, not on the weekend. And we'll do it for $10, $5 or $10, no drink minimum. I sold out in 20 minutes. And people had so much fun. And why don't we do that? Why don't we have someone go to a local movie theater and say, hey, if we come at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you know what? Spending 2 hours away from work in a year is not going to hurt a business.
Right. I agree. It's a part of the culture. It's
It
part of
is.
bonding. And I know I've seen some articles that were like, all these perks, people won't stay, but it's a collectively what that culture means, both from, resilience, but also it helps people be more creative. It helps people think outside the box and helps people bond. So there are
Absolutely. And you're right about the creativity. All the things I talked about, creativity goes through the roof. And we spend so much time at work. And now with the hybrid, I don't even know, it's going to be fascinating to see with so many people working from home. I mean, I'm a boomer. I like hugs. I like in person. However, as I shared with you earlier, I also enjoy virtual because it is business from the waist up, party from the waist down. Back me up.
So, okay, it's my last question. So when it's all said and done, what kind of legacy would you like to leave?
I think making a difference, and it doesn't have to be finding world peace. I think it's making people smile and having people realize that they're appreciated. I'm big on sending text to people that I love just to say, hey, thinking about you. I called my mom last week and said to her, I was up in Washington and I called her and I go, hey, mom, just want to tell you, my mom's almost 91 next month. And I said, I just want to tell you, you are a badass. I said, thinking back, because I was in an airport and I saw this mom with one kid by herself, like having a meltdown. And I thought, my dad was already in Africa when we went over. My mom, 4 little kids who'd never flown. We flew from LA to Paris, spent the night there, then to Africa, 4 kids by herself. I go, you are amazing. And she just laughed and goes, thanks. And we need to tell people that. We need to not just think it. We need to say, wow, I'm so glad you're in my life. Thank you. If you're a boss out there listening to it, buy a stack of notes, write a note, a personal note to someone and said, you know what, every time I come in the office and I see you smile, it makes my day. Thank you. Because I keep those and I know the employees will as well. It's just, I want to be remembered for being kind.
I totally agree with that. And if you have that culture of someone looking forward to that, or you feel like your boss appreciates you, that means a lot.
I know. I want to add something. I was working with a company and there was about 150 employees. And I was talking to their general manager and he said, people just don't seem happy. He goes, mostly reception. And there was about 10 people working in reception. So I went over to talk to them and I said, what would you like? And they said, we'd like him to know our name. And I went, really? And they said, yeah. He always comes over and goes, hi, looks down at the name tag. And so I taught a class with 150 students once, and I learned all of their names in a quarter. He can do that. So I went to him and he goes, what do they want? And I said, I have a feeling you would rather have me say they each want $500. He goes, what do they want? And I said, they want you to learn their name. And he goes, I'd rather give them each $500. And I said, why? And he goes, I don't know. I just don't think about it. And I go, it's important to them. Our names are important to us. And I don't think he did it. But again, talk to your employees, get to know them.
They were asking to matter.
Yes. They were asking him to care.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking. I was working with another man. He was the head of public works in San Luis Obispo. And so he worked for the county. And he said when he started, he met with every employee for 15 minutes and not about work stuff, about tell me about yourself. What's your favorite restaurant in town? I just moved here. And people loved it. And it was genuine. And what a lovely thing.
Yeah, you gave time. That was the gift.
Yeah. Yes. Look at how deep you are, Michelle. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Profound thoughts from Michelle.
So I know you have 2 books on your desk.
I do.
Show us your books.
So I wrote this one, I'd Like to Run Wild. And the story behind it is I was working at a home health agency for the staff. And one of the things they offered was hospice care. And they had a client who had a stroke. She was in her 80s. She wasn't able to speak or get out of bed her final days. And they would write on a clipboard, how do you feel? And every day she would pick up the pen, some days too weak to even write anything, sometimes smile face, a sad face. And one day, 3 days before she passed, she picked up the pen and wrote, I'd like to run wild. And it made me cry because she died 3 days later. And what made me sad was for her, but also all of us who are too sophisticated or too educated or too rich to run wild. I do every single day. One of my friends told me recently, it takes an hour to walk a block with you because you talk to every single person. I go, I do. I can make a best friend in an elevator. And so I wrote the book, I'd Like to Run Wild. And I actually have the actual paper that she signed hanging on my wall. And then it's a workbook. And then my sister, who's an air ambulance nurse, did all of the artwork free because she does not understand that people can get paid for it. And plus, I'm the oldest. And then I wrote this one, oddly enough, about customer service because I travel a ton and I see bad and good customer service. And I got a call from a hospital wanting to hire me to do customer service about 15 years ago. And I said, I don't do it. So they called me back in about a month. They go, I think you do. I said, why? And they said, we want communication, body language. We want attitude. I go, oh, I do those things, dealing with difficult people. And so it's just gentle reminders to people about being kind. You know what? We can forgive a lot in customer service if the person cares, right?
absolutely. And they felt heard and they felt like their voice or their complaint mattered and something came
Yes,
from that is huge. It just
it
did.
is. Listening. I have a chapter in here on listening. I think listening is a lost art. And simply listening and not like you're complaining to me and I'm like this. Yeah. Right? Focusing. Yep.
So where can people get these books?
At my website.
Well, I really appreciate all your time and thanks so much for coming on our podcast.
You are so welcome. You are a joy. You have what's called a Duchenne smile. It means it's a genuine smile that makes people happy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's lovely because this smile is not legit. Can I help you? You're going, oh my God, don't do that. Don't do that. Just stop. Wear a mask.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it, and feel free to post any questions so we can be inspired by new content. Thanks for listening. If you're interested in learning more, visit our website at bakercreative.co.